Welcome back. Now, our interest is to create some kind of actor that will travel us to another level. And before we continue on with developing that, I'd like to do something that's pretty fun using what we've already implemented here. You see, we already have a highlight interface on our checkpoint actor, and we have an overlap sphere that if we overlap with it, triggers something in response. And this is a actor that has a save game variable, be reached, which allows us to kind of know that we've reached a certain point. So I like that our checkpoints tell us that we've reached a certain point, but it would be nice if we had other little objects scattered throughout our dungeons that glow as soon as we reach them and basically give us what the beacons give us minus actually saving the game. So it's more just a sense of how far we are in the level, a sense of progress, but not exactly a checkpoint per se, in that it doesn't save the game's state. It doesn't save our state or our status. All I want it to do is save the fact that it's lit up. So that's actually pretty easy to do because of the system we already have in place. We can just inherit from what we have in our checkpoint. So what we can do is we can take our checkpoint. I'm going to close all other tabs except for checkpoint.h and just make sure that we have enough things exposed to Blueprint to easily extend this in Blueprint if we would like to. Now, I'd like handle glow effects to be Blueprint callable, so we can choose when and how to implement handle glow effects. So I'm going to make this Blueprint callable, as handle glow effects is going to call our checkpoint reached Blueprint implementable event after setting our checkpoint mesh material to a newly created dynamic material instance, as well as disabling the sphere. So we can implement that in a blueprint based on this class. So that's a Blueprint implementable event. Now, be reached is Blueprint read only, and it's our save game variable. I'd like to be able to set this from within Blueprint, so I'm going to make it Blueprint read write. And the reason for that is in Blueprint, I plan on implementing what happens when our sphere gets overlapped, as I don't want to save the world state and I don't want to execute save progress. I just want to handle glow effects. So we'll need to suppress that from within our Blueprint. Now, we can suppress that by simply not binding to it if we don't want to. We can have some kind of setting that prevents our callback from being bound, such as a Boolean called be call overlap callback. We can have this set to true by default, but we can override this in Blueprint by making it edit defaults only, or even edit anywhere. And then we'll only bind to onComponent begin overlap if be call overlap callback. Really, it should be bind overlap callback. Let's make it bind overlap callback. Now that's an option. So let's go ahead and close the editor down and compile and launch and make a new blueprint based on this. So we can browse to the asset of our checkpoint blueprint, and we can make a new one here. Right-click, blueprint class, checkpoint, and create a blueprint based on checkpoint. We can select that, and we can call this BP beacon. Now, this does technically mean this is a player start within our world, but we don't have to give it a player start tag, especially if we're always choosing a player start tag specifically when we load in. Let's open our BP beacon. And for the beacon, I'm going to choose its checkpoint mesh. I'm going to choose static mesh beacon, SM beacon. And I'm going to select BP beacon self and search for that setting, bind overlap callback. I'm going to uncheck that and leave the custom depth stencil value override to 252. So now that I have this beacon, I can see what it looks like in the world by dragging one in. So it looks like my capsule position is a little funky, so we can adjust that. I'm going to go ahead and undock this so I can see both screens. And just move my checkpoint mesh out just a bit away from my capsule component, which is right here. And I'd like to move it down as well. And I'm going to get this whole actor out just a bit so I know where it is in relation to the ground, and I can bring that pillar down a bit, like that. Now we do have a sphere as well, and I can increase that sphere radius if I like. I'm going to make it a little bigger, like this. I'm actually going to make sure to encompass that player starts capsule component. There we go. I can save all now and press play. And I can highlight it, so that means it's something special, right? If I click on it, at least if I had a nav mesh bounds volume, I could move to it. Now, in order to not be distracted by enemies, I'm going to delete that enemy and just get my nav mesh bounds volume back across the entire map. That way I can actually click to move, and I can test these things out, like clicking on this beacon and coming over to it. Now, we're no longer binding that C++ callback, but I'd like to use an overlap event for my sphere. I'm going to right-click and use onComponent begin overlap. And I'm going to see if the other actor does implement an interface. We'll check for the player interface. And if it does, well, then I'd like to do a few things. I'd like to call the blueprint callable function. We made this blueprint callable. It's called handle glow effects. And that's going to end up calling checkpoint reached. So after calling handle glow effects, I can implement checkpoint reached as well. And implement checkpoint reached. And I have a dynamic material instance at this point, so I can make a timeline. So I'll go ahead and make a beacon timeline. So add timeline, I'll call this beacon timeline. I'll open it up, add a track, we'll make it a float track called beacon track. I'll make it 1 second long and right click and add a key at time 0. It'll have a value of 0, and I'll right click and add a key at time 1, and it'll have a value of 1. I'll go ahead and select both keys, make it an auto curve so it's nice and smooth, and I'll go ahead and play this timeline and move this dynamic material instance with a reroute node around the timeline. And I know this dynamic material instance is valid and has a glow parameter because the beacon mesh, if I browse to it and take a look at its material, it's using MI beacon, and if I open that, it has a glow parameter. So I can call set scalar parameter value and call this on update and set the parameter name to glow. And I can scale this value if I would like a glow parameter. So I'm going to multiply that track value and promote this to a variable called glow factor. I know I've repeated that as we have a glow factor in the checkpoint as well. We could have made that a C++ member variable. But I'm going to compile and give glow factor a value of 100. And that way, we now have our checkpoint being reached. So now that we're calling the timeline, we should see our beacons glow. Let's test this out. And when we reach it, they glow. I think a glow factor of 100 looks fantastic, and it makes my checkpoints pale in comparison. So I'm going to open my checkpoint and take its glow factor and up that to, I believe, 100. It was 20. Let's see how 100 looks. That's fantastic. So now we have these beacons, right? And the beacons have a variable with save game. In fact, if we go into the My Blueprint panel, into variables, and we open the checkpoint dropdown, here's that reached. This is a save game variable. It has save game in its U property. And by the way, if you were wondering, you can make Blueprint created variables save game variables as well. You just have to expand advanced in their details panel and check save game if you wanted to save that as well. I don't want to save glow factor, but just pointing that out. Now this should, because it's a checkpoint and implements the save interface, it should remain glowing once we save the game and exit and come back. Let's test that out though. I'm going to put one right here. I'll move it right there. And why not? Let's bring one over here. I'm going to get a BP beacon on the ground right here. I'm going to hit the end key to bring it down. I think I'll rotate it by 90 degrees as well and move it right there. Okay, let's save all. Let's go to our load menu. I'd like to delete this slot and create a new one just called S. Select it and play. Let's reach this beacon. There we go. And let's reach a checkpoint. Let's exit and come back. And we did not save the beacon. And I believe we actually never set be reached to true. Let's do that after handle glow effects. As it was set in checkpoint in our overlap callback. So we're suppressing that. So we're never actually setting be reached to true, are we? Let's actually set it here. We made it blueprint read write. Let's set it to true on component begin overlap. And now we should be able to load in, reach the beacon, reach a checkpoint as well, exit, and come back. Let's see if that beacon is lit up, and it is. So we're saving that beacon, and it's now no longer reachable. And if we wanted to, we could actually suppress the highlight as well. If something is reached, for example, we could no longer highlight it. You could do that for a checkpoint as well if you wanted to. And that's really not too hard to do. You can just go into the checkpoint C++ class to the highlight function, highlight actor, and only highlight if be reached is false. So if not be reached, then you can set render custom depth to true, otherwise it would be false. So just a real quick test, testing out that feature. Let's see if we can get that highlighting suppressed when be reached is true. Okay, so we're back. I don't think I need these blueprints open, but I'm going to go ahead and open the load menu and select a slot. Let's go ahead and let's just reach this beacon over here. Okay, so we've reached it and we no longer get the highlighting. Perfect. Now we do still run to the location. We're still overriding that, and I'm fine with that. I'm actually okay with that. I would rather that because when an object puts a hole in the nav mesh, clicking on it gives us a pretty undefined location if we wanted to run to it. Okay, so this is great, and also, due to the cool nature of this highlighting that we get with new beacons, you can kind of count beacons, reaching them, as a measure of progress too. You could put something in the HUD that shows how many beacons you've reached, and when you clear a dungeon, you can know that you've cleared the whole thing if you've cleared all the beacons, and that can be something you can show at the end of a dungeon, for example. Excellent. Plus, they look really cool. I mean, look at those runes. That's pretty awesome. All right, excellent job, and I'll see you in the next video.